Yes, folks, it's Tales from the Jails with John G. Sutton. Do please like and subscribe. If you would, it really helps, honestly. And today I'm going to talk about, by special request actually, somebody had a request. And you can make a request. Comments down below. Please do leave me your comments, insults, all the lot. I'm game for a laugh. And seriously, I'm going to talk today about the abuse system in the prisons, which pertained in the 60s, 70s and 80s during the time that I was operational as a prison officer in jails such as the Scrubs and Strangeways. And I was asked shortly after the riots in 1990 by Alan Rusberger, the editor of the Guardian, the national newspaper, to write a feature on the causes behind the riot at Strangeways, which lasted 20-odd days and started on the 1st of April 1990. The article I wrote was in the Guardian and it was published on the 8th of June 1990, and it was titled Loose Screws, because it's about the strange behaviour of staff that I believe started the anger that fuelled the fire that destroyed Strangeways Jail. So let me start with the thing. You see, at the time, in the 70s and 80s, Strangeways had a big following of the National Front. The chairman of the National Front in the Northwest was a man called Brian Baldwin, who was a principal officer at Strangeways Jail. He was also the chairman of the Prison Officers Association, and to a certain extent that set the tone for the operations in the prison. They operated on the screws are right, and the governor was Norman Brown, who was a very decent man in my opinion. He was very much of the old school, ex-army captain who had been badly burned when he was a tank commander at the end of the Korean War. And that's why his ears were burnt, because he was stuck in a tank during an attack. But he was a very decent, straightforward gentleman of the old school. And he used to go into the bar at lunchtime and drink with the staff. He generally encouraged the prison officers to be in charge, rather like he would in the army. Well, the problem was, of course, as I previously explained, the inmates had no experience whatsoever of receiving direct orders, because the inmates were no longer ex-servicemen, the National Service having terminated in the mid-60s, and so the inmate population were complete civilians, very often never obeyed orders, never even received direct orders. So when the staff started issuing direct orders to them, because a lot of them were ex-military NCOs, such as myself, I was a non-commissioned officer in the Royal Artillery, having been kicked out of the parachute regiment for battling with people who call themselves potential officers. When they started to give me direct instructions, I said, I don't understand. What rank are you? I said, I'm a potential officer. I said, no such rank in the British Army that I know of, so take your hook. And what ensued was a physical interaction that resulted in me being taken before the colonel, whose, I think it was his nephew or something like that, I had insulted. Well, he needed bloody insulting. Anyway, the abuse system at Strangeways. One thing they practiced was known as the Foodfree diet. Now, the Foodfree diet consisted of leaving inmates locked into their cells at lunchtime and not allowing them to go and collect their meals. I challenged this with one of the senior officers. He was quite a prominent senior officer, actually. He's been on television numerous times saying how wonderful it felt to be a prison officer and how proud he was to wear the uniform. And no doubt he would have made a very good member of the Gestapo, because that is exactly how he behaved. Absolutely ridiculously abusing the inmates. And he had a hitman that worked for him, one of the inmates who was a notorious thug. He used to, anybody crossed this senior officer's path, he would send his hitman out to give them a dusting. I came across him one lunchtime when he was unlocked, and he shouldn't have been unlocked, and he just severely battered somebody in one of the recesses. So that was one of the way they did it. They got the biggest thugs in the prison, inmates, to work for them, and no doubt bribed them in some way. Another abuse of the staff was, of course, the block, which was used to terrorise people. Down the block they operated what's known as the silent regime. That's nobody spoke to the inmates at all. They were individually locked up in segregated accommodation, and none of the staff spoke to them. Opened the door, let them slop out, put them back in, not a word spoken. You can imagine that week after week, and you're down the block and nobody's speaking to you. You can't speak to any other inmates because you're unlocked one at a time. When they were allowed out on what's known as exercise, on the exercise yards, they were not allowed to speak. So, for some unknown reason, the staff down the block had decided that they were going back to the 1920s and they were going to operate the silent regime. And that was another abuse. I mean, that really plays with your mind. Also, there was the adulteration of food. I saw on a number of occasions quite senior members of staff, actually, placing rubbish and filth into inmates' food. One really large, extremely fat jailer, I saw him urinating into a tureen of soup. When I asked him what he thought he was doing, he said, "That'll fucking teach them." Well, what would it teach them? For a start off, they didn't know that he'd urinated into the soup. It was only he that knew he'd urinated into the soup, and me. And when I mentioned this to the officer in charge of the landing, he said, "You get about your duties, Sutton." In other words, it was condoned from the top down. In fact, to a certain extent, it was encouraged from the top down. There was also a very strange practice they had of losing the letters. So they'd take the letter out. If an inmate had crossed the path for some unknown reason, the strange-minded attitude to punish the inmates, they would take the letter out of the envelope, destroy the letter, rip it up into shreds and bin it, and then put the envelope into the inmate's cell. So they knew they'd got a letter, but when they asked where the letter was, because all they got was the envelope, said, "Oh, it must have fallen out. We can't find it." That's a kind of playing with their minds, you know. Also, there was the straightforward brutality, which was just inflicted upon what I would say was vulnerable inmates. Now, the vulnerable inmates are people who are slightly smaller than the staff, and they get a belt, a punch in the mouth, or slap round the head, and go and complain. Who are you going to complain to? Norman Brown, when he's had about half a dozen pints of Boddington's bitter? Well, he wouldn't be able to, because Norman went into his office and fell asleep in the afternoons. He was a character, as I say, he's a gentleman of the old school, but in my opinion, he was out of time. And then underlying all this, of course, we've got the basic racism of the National Front. And it's no good people saying the National Front were not racist. They were racist. I went to one of their meetings, and they were jumping up and down, shouting, "White power, white power." It was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So there was a great deal of tension in the prison, and of course, as time passed, the inmates grew a great deal of resentment against the staff for this kind of bullying, abusive treatment, and it resulted at the earliest opportunity in the riots that took place. And as I say, if you want to read more, you can look it up in your central library, your local central library. Just go and search for the Guardian newspaper, the 9th of June 1990, and it's the 8th of June 1990, 8th of June 1990, and you'll see there's an article in there. It's called Loose Screws by John G. Sutton, or John Sutton, I think they called me. Now, it's that time of day, folks. Hope you enjoyed that, by the way. Leave a comment. Come on. Have a look. Click down below. And also, have a look at my book. There we go. It's a song dinger time. Because I'm going to sing you a song now. I like this by Willie Nelson. I heard it the other day, and I really like this. So I'm going to see if I can sing you this. If I can manage to get the lyrics up. The lyrics are here. Are you ready? Are you sitting comfortably? Final warning, if you're around and you enjoy this, I expect to see you on the sick parade tomorrow morning. Don't know why there's no sun up in the sky. Stormy weather since my girl and I, we ain't together. Keeps raining all the time. Oh, life is bare, gloom and misery everywhere. Stormy weather, I just can't get myself together. I'm weary all the time, so weary all the time. When she went away, the blues walked in and met me. Oh yeah, if she stays away, that rocking chair, it's gonna get me. All I do is pray the Lord will let me walk in the sun once more. I can't go on, can't go on. Everything I have is gone. Stormy weather, stormy weather. Since my gal and I ain't together. Keeps raining all the time. Keeps raining all the time. Stormy weather. There you go. Stormy weather. Do please like and subscribe. Tales from the Jails.